baked spread, and I'm gonna teach you today how to make a sourdough starter from scratch. If you are here watching this video, you're probably wondering, what is sourdough? Why do I want to make it? And how can I make one? So we'll start off really quick. What is sourdough? Sourdough is a natural way of leavening, raising bread. So you use it in place of like a commercial yeast in your bread dough, and it raises the bread instead of that commercial yeast. It's actually a culture. So you're kind of doing a science project here. It's a culture of wild yeast and bacteria. And those two work together to raise bread, to acidify the dough a little bit. That's where the sour kind of flavor comes from, though it doesn't actually have to taste sour if you want to maintain your starter in a certain way. But basically, it's wild yeast and bacteria working together so that you can ferment your bread dough. That will raise it. It has some other health benefits to it as well. The fermentation process, it pre-digests the gluten, so it can be easier for your tummy to digest it. It's actually, you know, a little bit easier for you to eat it. Another thing is that it's lower on the glycemic index. It's just the natural way that bread was meant to be made, to be eaten, and it honestly makes incredibly, incredibly delicious bread. So I'm going to show you how to make one completely from scratch. I make sourdough for my family because we have some medical needs in our family that we do better eating naturally fermented sourdough. I make it because I like the taste better. We don't like overly sour breads, but the way that this sourdough culture raises and ferments the dough, it just gives it a better flavor. Now that I've been making sourdough for over 13 years, I can actually taste like the chemical taste of like overly yeasted breads from commercial yeast, which you don't taste with a sourdough culture. Sourdough has also been known to neutralize phytic acid, which can be found in grains, and that makes it easy for your body to absorb the nutrients. So I do like to use a little bit of freshly milled or whole wheat in my sourdough baking. So you're gonna see as we make this sourdough culture that you want to be using some whole wheat or rye in your culture. It's gonna make this culture faster. I also feel like when I eat sourdough bread, it keeps me full a little bit longer. It just is natural. It's absolutely delicious. I can't wait for you to make one too. Let's talk about how you can get a sourdough starter. Where can you get one? So you can make one from scratch. I've got a whole worksheet on my website. You can download it and you can learn how to make a starter from scratch. Now this is gonna be a 2 to 3 week process. I'm gonna walk you through it a little bit in a minute. So that's one way that you can get a sourdough starter. Another way is you can get one from a friend who already makes sourdough. Go online or ask your neighbors, does anybody make sourdough bread? People are very willing to give a little bit of their sourdough culture. You just need a little bit and you can create a culture from that. And then you can buy one. So I know like King Arthur has a really good one. I've bought that before when I didn't want to make one from scratch. I've made them from scratch many times, but sometimes you just want sourdough bread fast. And so they've got a live culture that can be easily taken out and turned into your own culture. And then another way, some people sell dehydrated starter. Maybe you can get some dehydrated starter from a friend and so you could rehydrate that and turn it into your sourdough culture. All right, well, give me a few weeks of your time, a few ingredients, and you're gonna be able to make this culture from scratch all by yourself. Before we make our sourdough starter, let's talk a little bit about a sourdough culture in general and what you're gonna be looking for over these next couple of weeks. So sourdough fermentation, the way that it works is you take a little bit of this culture, you feed it flour and water, then you set it aside and you let it do its own fermentation. Okay? It only takes a few minutes every day to keep this going. What you're looking for a rise doubling in size. You're looking for bubbles throughout your culture. You're looking for a mild, milky sweet point when it reaches the top. And then once it doubles in size, it's going to fall back down. And this is a cycle. This is a fermentation cycle that happens with a sourdough culture. That's what we're gonna be looking for, is we want to create this culture that will do this. That when we mix it up with a little bit of the culture, we mix it with flour and water, we mark our jar to where the line that we mixed it to, and then we're gonna watch and see if it rises at all. And we want eventually for it to double or even triple in size. Then it will fall back down to that line and it will become more liquidy, it will become more acidic over time. That's what we're looking for in a sourdough culture. We're gonna make a starter from scratch. One quick plug, if you are a brand new beginner for sourdough baking, I wrote a book all about sourdough, A Beginner's Guide to Sourdough, with 50 incredible recipes in here as well. But this will tell you everything you need to know, including how to make a starter from scratch, all of the details. The numbers themselves are a little bit different than the ones that you're gonna find on my website. And that's just because I'm contractually obligated to not share the things from the book on my website. But it's basically just kind of cut in half. So if you prefer to have a little bit smaller portion of starter, you can use the one from the book. But grab this book if you're a newbie. It is invaluable. We're ready to make our sourdough starter. So I have here whole wheat flour. You can either use whole wheat or rye. It's really important to add some whole wheat into your feeding. And that's because the whole wheat has more of those like microorganisms that the wild yeast and bacteria we're trying to culture love. So if you don't use the whole wheat or the rye, it's gonna take you much, much, much longer to create a starter from scratch. And this is already like a 2 to 3 week process. And so it can just make it really tough if you're not using a whole wheat or a rye with your flour. So definitely recommend you add some of that into your making a starter. And then I use like a bread flour or an all-purpose flour, either one. I like the combination of both of these flours. The whole wheat or the rye flour is gonna give, you know, those extra microorganisms in there that we need for the bacteria and the wild yeast. But the white flour makes it more elastic, makes you see that rise more. So that's why I like the combination. If you did 100% like rye, which is actually what they do a lot in Europe, you could make it even go faster. And then you could transition it over to like a more feeding with all-purpose or bread flour eventually. So you could do that. So this is just gonna be like a method that you could use and switch it up as you need to fit your environment, to fit your schedule. But definitely make sure you're adding in some of that whole wheat or rye into your feeding. Because we are trying to culture bacteria and wild yeast to come together, this is gonna be a process. It's gonna take us, typically, every time that I've made a sourdough starter from scratch, it's taken about 2 to 3 weeks. You're gonna have best results if you are keeping your temperature warm, 76, 78 degrees, that's what I mean by warm. Okay, I like to even have a thermometer where I actually test the temperature. The first couple of days of feeding are gonna look a little different than the other days, and that's because we're trying to establish this culture. But really, it's going to take you all of probably 5 minutes every day. Once you hit about day 4, if you're smelling things, if you're seeing a little bit of activity in some way, you can move to feeding twice a day to help speed things up a little bit. Okay, but this is basically a science experiment. And I know by day, I think every time by like day 8 or 9, I'm like, is this even gonna work? Is this gonna, but if you follow the method of keeping it warm, using a bottled water at first, all of these kinds of things that I've listed in this online guide, you can print it out. It's got lots and lots of detailed information for you to help you to make the starter from scratch. And then a feeding overview sheet so you can make notes like a scientist would. Just keep it in your kitchen, make notes as you go along. Anyway, here are the things that you're gonna need to do this. I don't wanna make this more complicated than it is, because really all it is, you're taking flour, you're taking water, you're mixing them together, you're keeping it at a warmish temperature, you're letting it sit. That's basically all you're doing. The next day, you're gonna come back to it. It's gonna maybe smell kind of fermented or not bad. You're gonna take part of that culture, put it into a new jar, feed it fresh flour and water, mix it up, let it sit, okay? The next day, you're gonna see oh, that's a little fermented smelling. You're gonna pull out some of that fermented culture. You're gonna feed it fresh flour and water, mix it up, let it sit. Basically, that is feeding a sourdough starter, but it's also how you create a sourdough starter. Okay, I'm interrupting this for a second. Here's the honest truth. I've been a little bit hesitant about showing this process of making a starter from scratch because I have sourdough bacteria already in my kitchen. I have wild yeast, I have the bacteria. So if I'm making a starter in my own home kitchen, it's gonna go a lot faster than it may for, you know, somebody else who doesn't have any of those wild yeast and bacteria yet in your kitchen because you're trying to culture them. Even if I got like a teaspoon or a little smidge of starter accidentally into the culture I was trying to create, that's gonna make my starter active and ready to go. And so I don't want this to come across as like, look at me, I can make a starter in, you know, a week or in 2 weeks or something like that. So this is for me to show you the process. I have made starters from scratch. I've made many starters from scratch in different areas and at different times in my life. I've been baking sourdough for over 13 years. And the first time that I did a starter, I think it was like the dead of winter. And it took me like 5 or 6 weeks. Okay. I do not want that to happen to you. So I've put together all this information so that that doesn't happen to you. And I'm gonna show you how to do it. But the truth of the matter is my kitchen is different from your kitchen. Every environment is a little bit different. And so I'm gonna show you the process, how you would make it, but it's gonna look different from kitchen to kitchen. It's gonna take you maybe longer than it would take me in my current kitchen because I have all those bacteria and wild yeast in my kitchen. If you don't have any of those, it's gonna take you a little bit longer, and that's okay. Just know that ahead of time. And I just wanted to pop in and say that my kitchen will be different than yours. But that doesn't mean you can't make a starter, and I'm gonna show you how to do it. Jar, and I have marked this jar with a rubber band right here, okay? That's how I'm going to be able to tell if my starter is rising at all. Okay, now we're not looking for a rise probably until the 2nd week at least. So I'm gonna put my jar on my scale, and then I'm gonna use bottled water because some tap water can have like chlorine in it or things like that, and we just don't want anything to contaminate this culture as it's getting started. As the culture continues, the longer that it's around, the more you feed it, the stronger it gets. So you don't have to feed it with this bottled water when you actually have a culture that's rising and falling. Looking at the sheet that I printed out, I have all of this on my website. I have it in a recipe card. I have this sheet that you can print out for a feeding overview. All of these things to try to make this the most successful as possible for you if you want to make a starter from scratch. So we're gonna start with 125 grams of filtered water, or bottled water works too. Then I'm gonna tare my scale. Okay, we're gonna add in 100 grams of flour. I'm gonna do 50 grams of whole wheat. I just milled this whole wheat. You can use whole wheat from the grocery store, you can use freshly milled, either way. And then I'm gonna do 50 grams of my all-purpose flour right here. This is the beginning of my sourdough culture. Okay, I've got a little more water than I do flour. Then I'm gonna take this and just mix it all up. It's going to look like a pretty thin batter at first. I like to scrape down the sides so that you can see if anything is going on here. Okay, and then I mark the jar so that it's got this rubber band right here, and you're going to loosely cover it. So this is just a ball jar. Put the lid on, and I'm just gonna like loosely tighten it I want air to still be able to get out of it. And so that's why it's just very loose on top. But if I left it uncovered, it would dry out the top, and I don't want that to happen. So now we're gonna set this in a dark place for about 24 hours, and we'll come back to it tomorrow. So I use my starter tracking sheet. I'm putting that I fed it at 10:30 a.m. And then I'm gonna take the temperature of this starter, and it is 70 degrees. I'm gonna put 70 degrees Fahrenheit so I know how much it was. And then I'm going to put it in a little bit of a warmer spot. I have a bread proofer, I have a dough mat, even my oven with the light on can work for this as well. I'm gonna keep it warm, and we'll come back to it tomorrow. I'm setting this at 78 degrees, sticking my culture into this warming proofer. Okay, we're on day 2 of my starter. So here's what it looks like. See all that liquid? That is normal for this kind of a thing, making a starter from scratch. You've not killed it, it's not mold, anything like that. The only time you'd really want to start over is if you see pink, orange, fuzz, that's mold. You don't want that. It didn't rise any at all. So this is day 2. So I've got my sheet here. I'm on day 2, and I'm going to do 75 grams of this starter. And I'm gonna mix it with 100 grams of the flour in a new jar and 115 grams of the filtered water. I'm using my freshly milled wheat. This is how I get my wheat. You can buy wheat flour from the grocery store. You don't have to mill your own for this. Put my jar on the scale. I'm just gonna stir down this mixture. We're gonna add 75 grams of it into the jar. Tare my scale. We're using bottled water. 115 grams of that. I'm gonna mix that up together. It's nice to use a clean jar every time, just because this is a culture you're trying to create. So just using a clean jar for the new culture, I think is helpful. And then it's day 2. We're doing 50 grams of whole wheat and 50 grams of all-purpose. Mix this together. And then we're going to set it in a warm place again. Take the temperature if you need to. 76 to 78 is your ideal temperature. We're gonna lightly put the lid on here and put on a rubber band where we marked the jar. And that's it for day 2. We'll come back in 24 hours. I'm gonna mark my sheet also that I fed the starter about 10 a.m. today, and I'll take the temperature and add my temperature on there as well. This was low yesterday, so I had to bring it up a little bit, but 76 to 80 degrees is the temperature you want to try to keep this culture while it's growing. During this process of making a starter from scratch, if you don't have a way to keep your starter warm, I definitely recommend a dough mat. A seed starting mat can help too. This is really easy because you can just set the temperature to what you want, put a towel underneath it, and then you can keep your starter on the mat or even kind of wrapped around it a little bit to help just to keep it warm. Another thing that can work is your oven with the light turned on, or sometimes that can get too hot, so you kind of have to be careful. I do recommend taking the temperature when you can, just so that you're aware of the temperatures. You are creating a culture completely from scratch, and so you do want to have good consistent temperatures and clean environments, which is why I'm gonna now put my starter into a new jar and feed it again. We're on day 3 of making our sourdough starter. Sometimes you'll notice a false rise. That can definitely happen. I noticed some water separation down there, and I am just stirring this up. It smells not the best. That can be kind of normal with a starter. I'm going to add 75 grams of the starter into my jar. And then I will feed it with 115 grams of this filtered water. Actually, this was a bottled water. And then 50 grams of flour, whole wheat flour, and we'll do 50 grams of our all-purpose or bread flour. I'm gonna stir it up. Clean jar for this culture. Mark my jar. Close it up here, just loosely, not too tight. I'm gonna set it in a warm spot, which right now is gonna be my dough mat, to try to keep it in that 76 to 80 degree temperature range. I'm gonna mark my sheet here, 10 a.m., and then I'm gonna check my temperature. Oh, it's a little chilly, so I definitely need to keep it in a warmer spot for the next 24 hours. And we will come and check on it again. Tomorrow will be day 4. What do you do with all this leftover from all of these days? This is the time you actually do want to discard it. So I'm gonna throw this away. This doesn't have the wild yeast and bacteria that I am looking to culture. And so I don't wanna use it because it's not really meant for consumption yet. This is why I cannot show you how to make a sourdough starter from scratch in my kitchen, which is filled with wild yeast and bacteria from my own sourdough starter, because those sourdough microorganisms are so present that they have already jumped and got in, and maybe there were little bits somewhere on the stir tools that I was using, or, you know, accidentally the lid touched another part. There could be so many ways that these, even the microorganisms just in my kitchen, they come when I'm using these kind of flour. So all that to say, follow along, do your feedings, use the chart. I've done this before many times when I didn't have a starter. It's just that any sourdough baker that you follow, if they're trying to show you how to make a starter completely from scratch, a lot of times when they have that wild yeast and bacteria already in their kitchen, it's going to happen way, way faster for them than it may for you in a kitchen that doesn't have that wild yeast yet, doesn't have that bacteria yet. So for you, it's going to take you potentially much longer. Typically, I say 2 to 3 weeks. The most important notes I will just end this with, because I'm not going to keep showing you how I'm feeding this because it's basically become a sourdough starter already. This is not normal. You wouldn't see this after only a couple of days. You may see a false rise, but in your own kitchen, you're probably not going to see that happen this quickly. Like, it just doesn't happen. You need 2 to 3 weeks typically to make a culture. If you want to try to go faster, you can start feeding it when you get to day 4 in the morning and in the evening. Just follow the guidelines, follow this, follow the temperature. Those are my best tips for making a starter from scratch. You can do it. It is possible. And then you're going to end up becoming like me. And it's almost impossible for you to create a starter from scratch again, because you have all of the right things in your kitchen, all the things going for you. Not that it's impossible, just happens a lot faster when you have all those things. Sorry if this wasn't very helpful. I'm just here to tell you, you can do it. It is possible. Go download my free guide and just keep feeding your starter. Don't give up. Just keep feeding it. You will be able to make a starter completely from scratch.